Okay. Let's try this again.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of Forking Off. I'm Jill Fields.
And I'm Philip Fields.
And today we have with us Allan Dinkoff. Hi, Allan. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, we're so excited to have you here with us today. So, for everyone out there, Allan's been working on a project kind of similar to what Forking Off has been doing, except for with photographs and a written story. So, Allan, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your project and what you're doing?
Sure. So the project went through various working titles over the course of the year. It started off as not collateral damage, and I called it not collateral damage because the Trump administration has tried to spin what's happening to our federal workforce as collateral damage to efforts to make the government more efficient, where I think it's pretty clear from their words and action that government efficiency has absolutely nothing to do with what they've been doing to our federal workforce, both from their words before they took office about holding federal workers accountable, calling them criminals and part of a deep state, and Russell Vogt talking about traumatizing the federal workforce and putting them in trauma and having them viewed as villains. Well, they certainly succeeded in doing all of that, and I think it's pretty clear that it was never collateral damage to some misbegotten and poorly named government efficiency effort. But ultimately, I then try to call it silenced voices. And then somebody pointed out that they're not silenced because I'm trying to give voice to these people. And then it ultimately landed on targeted portraits of civil servants under Trump. And the project was undertaken as part of the International Center of Photography's documentary photography program that I got admitted to. And it's a year-long program, and you, as part of that program, do a long-term project. Most of the people, almost everybody else in my cohort, are doing sort of more typical projects that can go on, and many of these projects will go on for many years. And my original project when I was admitted to the program that I had in mind was to do a portrait of the town that I live in, which is racially diverse. Not the neighborhoods; each particular neighborhood in my town is not diverse, but those different neighborhoods do come together on Main Street in a very diverse kind of way. And I was going to try and capture all of that. My wife told me I was crazy, but she probably was right. But I thought it would be a good project. And then Trump happened, and I just sort of felt that was way too prosaic, and I needed to do something that met the moment. And in looking at other societies that have gone through authoritarian regimes and talking to people who were either in the middle of an authoritarian regime or who had survived or whose country had survived an authoritarian regime and had emerged on the other side of that authoritarianism, one of the things they talked about was the need to bear witness. And I felt that I needed to bear witness and that I had to use my photography project to bear witness. And I started by thinking about, well, I should document groups that have been impacted by the Trump administration. Of course, there's an infinite variety of those kinds of groups. And after sort of sorting through various options, landed on federal civil servants. I think, legitimately, and the attention has largely, there's been some attention on the civil servants themselves, but largely the attention, again, quite rightly in many ways, is on the impact that the cut in these to the federal civil service has had on the world and people in America. And when you talk to civil servants, that's where they want to keep the focus as well. They want to talk about how the fact that they're not doing what they used to be doing is impacting the people that they used to serve. And that's where they want to keep the focus. But I think it's also important to put the focus on the people who were directly impacted by what happened. That their stories need to be told, that America needs to understand that these are not numbers, that these are not faceless people, that these are not federal workers, that as somebody interviewed early on in my project said to me that she really hates being called a federal worker and that she really wishes people would understand that we're civil servants, that we are here to serve the people of this country. We're not workers, we're civil servants serving you. And the need to get that message out and to not get the message out full stop. And also just for people to understand what the actions of the Trump administration means to people in human terms. I mean, it has been devastating, as both of you well know, to the people who have been impacted by this horrible, illegal, and immoral actions.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you're doing this project. You've said a lot of the things that Philip and I have mentioned in our podcast with our interviews. We're really focused more on the stories of what's happening and the loss that our country is encountering now. I think the statistic at the end of the year was 318,000
that's what I've heard.
Employees are no longer with the federal government. That's flooding the market. That's programs that are completely gone, like USAID, huge swaths of Department of State, CDC, DHS. The impact is so great. And I think the American people have not fully realized that impact just yet.
No, absolutely. I mean, the statistics for USAID alone are staggering. I mean, the estimates are 600,000 people will have died in 2025 because of the ending of USAID, 400,000 of them children. The estimate is 14 million more will die over the next 5 years, 4.5 million of them children under the age of 5.
Oh my goodness.
So, I mean, just the that kind of impact is just hard to even begin, to fathom. But again, my project has been focused, try to turn the focus really, to the people who are doing this work, and let America hear the kind of impact that it's had on them, on their lives. Part of the inspiration for the project also was the great opening line of Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, which is every happy family is happy in the same way, and every miserable family is miserable in their own unique way. And at 30,000 feet, everybody's got the same story. But everybody, of course, has been impacted in their own very unique way. Everybody has their own very unique story, their own very unique voice that needs to be heard. And that's what I'm trying to do with this project through photographs and the interviews.
A lot of the justifications that we had for starting this project, this is happening to so many people, and a lot of people aren't necessarily getting to be heard. They're saying things, but it's not an even playing field. And so we were just trying to create more of a platform for people who we thought needed to be heard more.
We also wanted to document this as it was happening and while it was still fresh in people's minds, because as you mentioned, that is the most important part, is having that information available for the future. It's important for right now, but it's so important for the future to see all of the steps that were taken and how it impacted and how things fell into place.
Yeah, and that's why when Jill and I started this, the first thing that we did was interviewed each other, just because we wanted to make sure that we got how we were feeling about it right then,
Right.
And I mean, even then it was a few months later, but I think when we've gone back and listened to those recordings now, we're like, wow, like so much has changed since then.
Yeah, and by doing it so close in time, there's still that rawness. This is for very good reason. This is obviously a very emotional thing that happened to them, because it's emotional for so many reasons. It's senseless. I was a lawyer in corporate America for many years, and I was an employment lawyer for part of my career, and went through my share of risks and helped companies navigate through that. But at least the companies that I always did it for, there was always a clear reason why we're doing it. We articulated the reason. People understood what the reason was, that the company had to go through this. They understood the criteria we used and how we arrived at our decisions. They may not have appreciated or wanted themselves to be fired, of course, but at least understood it was a rational process that was undertaken for legitimate reasons, and it was always done in a compassionate way, which is, of course, the polar opposite of what happened here. As somebody who I interviewed said, it's as though I gave my 2-year-old a red crayon and said, "What parts of the federal government don't you like?" And I think that kind of summarizes in many ways, at least some of the ways in which they've been approaching these so-called efficiency efforts.
Absolutely.
Yes, that is spot on. Yes, because it just feels like there's no rhyme or reason. Well, Allan, so how many people have you spoken with so far? Have you photographed?
65 people at 19 agencies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot.
I think I was counting last night. I think we've done like 15 or 16 interviews of other people for this season. Yeah, I don't know how we would manage that.
I know. That's...
Yeah, you have to, as you guys know, you have to prepare for each one of the interviews. I don't walk in cold, not knowing anything about them. Right. I Google them. I read the LinkedIn profiles. I try to find whatever I can about them. So I don't walk in cold. I walk in knowing something about them.
Exactly. That's us. We do a pre-interview with everyone. Like we talked with you on a video call. Actually, like a couple of months ago, we got to get it. We had a feel so that we would understand where you were and you would understand where we were.
Yeah, but I of course walked in cold. I'd never met these people before. In most situations, I mean, some of the people I had met, one of the ways I got people was a group of federal civil servants who had been terminated, almost, like some were currently still working, but almost all terminated, show up at the atrium of the Senate Hard Office Building every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock when Congress is in session. And it's organized by AFGE, which is the largest federal employee union. And they have one of their legislative people sort of play den mother, if you will. And they go around trying to talk to senators and congressmen. Republicans are always late for a vote. Democrats stop to talk. And I would go up to them and talk to them, do my elevator speech, give them my card, get their contact info. So I would have met them at least briefly in that context. But otherwise, I would just, that was like a very brief conversation.
Yeah, we had initially put out, hey, if anyone wants to do this, and we thought we're gonna have maybe 2 episodes, and it's gonna be us. I mean, that's gonna be it. But we've been surprised we've had so many people reach out.
That's great.
And we've actually had to tell some people right now, like we are wrapping up the first season because we're starting a business and we have to actually do something besides editing audio. So because it takes a long time to edit and put things together. So like, okay, we're going to do a season 2. We promise we got to get through the end of this year.
Yeah. But it's also, it's been a little like strange for us because we've been in these jobs for so long where we don't really, our interactions with the public are very controlled, and we don't interact with the public unless like we've planned to. And so
very coordinated.
And so now there's just like these strangers who are reaching out and they're like, hey, you know, I like what you're doing. I would like to take part. And we're like, how do we know you're not a North Korean spy? And so, yeah, we've gotten over that. You know, people have done a really good job of finding us. We've had great guests, and
you have. The show's been great.
Yeah, and so I don't think we've had to screen out any Russian spies so far.
No Russian spies. So, but yeah. So, Allan, what themes have you seen emerge? Because we know we've seen certain statements said multiple different times in multiple different ways. What about you? What have you seen?
Yeah, well, I agree with. I went back and listened to your podcasts, and I agree that the themes you guys identified of purpose, you know, dream job, you know, commitment to, you know, to doing the right thing, were certainly things that emerged all from my interviews. That's what's the common theme, and the sorrow and the frustration and the trauma. In fact, at one point I thought of calling my project Trauma. That got shot down. But I guess the way I sort of encapsulate it, all of which I think all those things are 100% true, and I think do a lot to capture what it meant to be a civil servant and for our government. The way I sort of think about it, though, is purpose. That these people found their purpose in life, and that these jobs allowed them to give voice to that purpose and to give their lives meaning. And the service giving to others is what gave them purpose. And I think when you take a look at America in 2025, I think their story is the story of America in 2025. The story of our civil servants is the story of America in 2025. That a country that's going to turn on its civil servants who are giving so much to this country so selflessly. Can't tell you how many people I spoke to who could be making a ton more money if they were working at an investment banking firm or a consulting firm and instead chose to give their time and energy and life to serving others and serving this country. And they did it for that sense of purpose. And when a country turns on people like that, turns on their civil servants, it's turned on itself. That these people are America. You know, I interviewed Asians, blacks, whites, Hispanics. People I interviewed were Christian, Jewish, Mormon, Muslim. They were straight, they were gay, they were cis, they were transgender. They are America. And we've turned on ourselves. We've turned on America. And I think not only have we deprived them of their sense of purpose or taken away their ability to give voice and expression to their sense of purpose, but we've also taken away our country's sense of purpose.
I still don't really know how to process the idea that the America that we all grew up knowing is very likely gone for the rest of our lives. And, you know, whether or not it comes back it's still a big question mark.
Yeah, or how long, if it does, how long will it take? And I think you know, some people say, and I think quite rightly, and just history, they're correctly recapping history, which is that countries which were democracies, liberal democracies, went through an authoritarian period and emerged out the other side of that authoritarianism and reestablished their democracies. That's certainly, I guess, possible for America. I think what makes it more challenging for America is what America is. America, despite what J.D. Vance says, is an idea. And it's a belief in certain ideals and certain common purpose and, you know, Declaration of Independence, the words that are on the Statue of Liberty. Those are all things that form who we are as America. If you want to become an American, believe in those ideals, and you can be an American. There are ideas that make you American. And if we've destroyed those ideas, I think it's much harder. If the country no longer lives by those ideas, I think it's much harder. I don't want to say it's impossible because I tend to try to be an optimist, but I think it's much harder to come out the other side when your nation is in fact built on an idea and not, as J.D. Vance would say, blood and soil.
It is absolutely an idea.
You know, we've talked a lot with people about immigration policy changes and like attacks on federal employees and all of these different groups that have been targeted this year. But there's also this attack on the idea of what it means to be America. And I think that's what you're getting at there is it's not just that they're trying to remove some groups from the United States or they're trying to remove some people from the government. It's that they're trying to remove these ideas from what it means to be American. And that is the most dangerous thing that can happen to our democracy.
Yes, and I think, I'm probably a big fan of Ronald Reagan and disagree with him about probably at least 99% of the things he or maybe 90% of the things he believed in. But I always find it useful to actually compare the way he spoke about issues back in the 80s to the way we speak about them today. Now that we're on the 5-year anniversary of January 6th, I went back and looked at his first inaugural address and how he starts that inaugural address by thanking President Carter and how he talks about the miracle. He calls it the miracle that the rest of the world looks upon us with admiration, how every 4 years we have a peaceful transfer of power. And immigration, I went back and looked at his farewell address to the nation in January of 1989. He says, for me, much of my presidency and what it means to be American is captured by this letter I got from a sailor on an aircraft carrier in the Pacific. And he talks about how they were at sea and they saw this raft of refugees coming from Vietnam or Laos. And they went to go rescue, of course, the raft. And one of the refugees on the raft, as the boat approached, said, "Hello, sailor man. Hello, freedom." And for him, that's what captured his presidency in America. And you just and immigration is a complicated question. There's a lot of room for a lot of debate about how to handle it. But we need to be talking about it in those terms. We need to be, that's how we need to be talking about it. How you talk about a problem is as important, is how you get to the right solution.
And even going into the first Trump administration, Obama sat down with him there on Inauguration Day and said, they had a civil conversation and he attempted to continue that tradition. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
I mean, J.D. Vance, just think about what just happened, right? January 6th of 2025, Kamala Harris counted the votes that made Trump president.
Not her.
And J.D. Vance has said publicly that if he was vice president on January 6, 2021, he would not have certified the votes. So he will have to count the votes on January 6, 2029. And I don't think we can have any confidence in how that's going to go.
We have little confidence in a lot of things right now, very little confidence. But yeah, I don't see where or how we're going to be moving forward. But I do think you're right. With the theme purpose and serving, so many of the people we've talked to, so many of our friends and colleagues, that's been their biggest thing, is serving. We've seen through all of this trauma that you have groups and you have individuals who are finding other ways to serve.
Yes.
And other ways to give back because it's so ingrained in who we are and what we've been doing for so long. It's so much our purpose to help others and to help the American people, and to see so many of the federal employees that were wrongly terminated or felt like they had to take the deferred resignation, or they were riffed, or they just completely had their organizations obliterated. We have all reached out and we have built a really strong community to help the rest of our communities.
That's the one area where it's easy to be optimistic and it's easy to see the positive that is going on with everybody who continues to have hope and to look for new ways to apply the sense of purpose that they had before. That's the biggest theme that I've seen and the most inspiring thing. And the one thing that I think can help us make it through this is, knowing that there's 318,000 people out there now who are nearly all probably feeling the same way and trying to find new ways to help this country, that they would have been stifled if they were trying to do that within the existing administration. You can think of this idealistic situation where, everybody stayed and they all got to continue doing the jobs that they were doing, but that's not realistic. And so knowing that all of those people are now out in the world and being able to try and make it a better place without those restrictions is actually really inspiring to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going to the point you just made, which is that some people I spoke to, I mean, almost all of them were fired, but some waited through the first Trump administration and they thought it would be sort of the same again and be okay and not perfect, but okay. But they felt they had to leave because, as one person I spoke to said, I signed up to help protect people with disabilities. And that was the mission of the part of DOJ that I was a part of. And I was proud to do that work to help people with disabilities get the benefits to which they're entitled. And now all of a sudden I'm being told that what I have to do is go after people who are protecting transgender rights. And they said, I'm an attorney, I have integrity. I'm not doing that. That's how I went to law school. It's not why I joined DOJ. And as somebody else who I spoke to said, the DOJ, again, have served through 4 administrations, including Trump 1, that the current DOJ is not the DOJ that the witnesses and victims who taught me so much about America would recognize. And so she felt she had to leave. And the first person I spoke to who left from the disabilities area, she quit. She just had a child. She had no job. She had just had a baby. And she quit. She said, I'm not doing this.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that quite a bit. So being the FBI, like we're part of DOJ, we were absolutely seeing such a change in what we were being asked to look at, what we were being asked to investigate, and what the priorities were going to be and how they were going to shift. And I know for me, I couldn't stay when I was being asked to do things that were completely against my morals and my ethics. They'd already let me know, like the 7th floor, so the director's office in DC knew of me. And so
not in a good way, I assume.
Not in a good way.
That's never
a good thing when they tell you that the 7th floor knows about you. That's a bad
unless
thing.
you're getting an award from them.
Yeah, it's not a good thing. And they told me that right after Bongino had visited the LA office. I want to go back to some questions with you, Allan. You've told us like the themes that you saw throughout, but was there anything that surprised you throughout your interviews?
Yeah, so it's sort of best summed up by one of the classes I took as part of the program was in writing, and we talked about how things I was pulling out of the interviews that I had done, and the instructor kept saying to me, Allan, I want the stories of drug addiction. I want the stories of attempted suicide. I want the stories of alcoholism. I want the stories of broken marriages. Those are the stories I want to see you put down. I said, that's great, Jacques, but I don't have those stories. And the reason I don't have those stories is because of how resilient everybody was. And that was one of the things that really struck me was the level of resilience that I found among the people that I spoke with. People who've had their life, the job that gave voice to the purpose of their life taken away from them. People who are looking at, sitting there counting, how long before the rent money runs out. How long before somebody who used to coordinate disaster relief for USAID, she was talking about, I've got another 3 months before I run out of rent money. And I'm talking to a friend of mine. He says, you know how you use a wrench? And she says, yes. And she says, well, if you need rent money, I put up party tents, come with your wrench, so people were facing real hard, as both of you know very well, real hard choices. These are not people who, some people were better financially situated than others, but, for a lot of them, it's how am I going to pay the rent?
Oh, yeah.
In addition to having, the job that gave so much meaning and purpose to their life taken away from them, people who can't have a child, they were going through IVF. And the stress of losing their job and what was going on was interfering with their stimulation cycles and the IVF treatments. And of course, they couldn't afford it anymore. So now they're not having children. They can't have their own child because of what's going on here. And yet they're incredibly resilient and finding their way through it.
Yeah, that is the resilience part. I had an old colleague, she'd heard the podcast and we had talked about everything. And she was like, Jill, there's a book there for resilience. And like you're using that resilience in what you're doing with your project and with looking at writing a book with all of this. And that's something, yes, you can see it. You can see that resilience because I don't know if everybody's just a fighter or,
yeah, I think so.
What.
Yeah. I think it's the same qualities that draw people to these types of jobs that prepare people to go through this situation. You're not finding drug addicts and things like that, people who are going to immediately go to the darkest place, because these are people who already had a very positive outlook on life and were not predisposed to these things. I'm sure, if we dug hard enough, we'd find some.
Oh, absolutely.
318,000 people, I'm sure that's true. And maybe
be
since we have a self-selected group who are talking to us.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really struck me was their resilience. And going to something you were talking about before, people coming together, I want to put a plug in for this great, amazing organization called We Are Well Fed, established by Drew, Ty, Ruby Howe, and Rebecca Ferguson Andre. These two women, within 24 hours of being fired from their jobs, created this organization which provides just amazing resources for federal workers who have left their jobs or are afraid of losing their jobs. Everything from free headshots to meditation sessions to career counseling to interview skills to how to reinvent yourself for another career. So if you are a fired Fed, and I really urge you to reach out to go on their website. They have something every week. They have get-togethers. These two women have just created this absolutely amazing organization from absolutely nothing. They got fired in within 24 hours on the phone with each other creating this organization. So
yeah, I mean, I'll put my plug in for it too. They have held different seminars. They have supported former Feds who have come to them with programs that they are doing and classes that these employees are putting together, and they're helping sponsor them to help people build their businesses and to help do things like that. But they also do, I believe it's a meditation Monday. Yes. I think they've had some virtual coffee hour, happy hour type things.
And if you're in Washington, D.C., they have them in person sometimes too.
Yeah. Yes. That's the one negative of being on the West Coast is there aren't as many of us because there's, of course, the large concentration in D.C. But yeah, they've been a really great connection point for a lot of us as we've been impacted.
Let me give you a plug for one other person I spoke to who used to work for NIH and is now baking cookies. And it's gingersnapjesscookies.com. And the cookies are amazing. She makes her own cookies. And that's part of the way they're helping to keep themselves together is she's baking and selling cookies. She sells them, at farmers markets and stuff out in the Maryland area. But she also has an online presence. So gingersnapjesscookies.com.
There's been a lot of inspiring efforts that have started up out of this. We interviewed Sarah Digiu, who her and some other former CDC employees started a violence prevention organization that is trying to fill the gap that the public was getting from CDC before, as far as, advice and research on how to protect their organizations. There's another guy who he opened a baseball card shop because that was his lifelong dream, Yeah, there's just so many stories like that of people who instantly were like, okay, well, I have my plan. I'm ready to go. That's so admirable because it took us months to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? And we're still,
Other than the podcast, what's your plan for next?
The podcast isn't.
There's no money making here.
Right. As a matter of fact, the podcast is costing us way more than it's helping. Anybody in financial need should not consider podcasting.
Yeah, this is not where you get wealthy.
This was more of something that we felt compelled to do and capable of pulling off. Yeah. So hopefully we're pulling it off.
I think you are.
I think you are. So there's a reason that we hadn't left federal government years before, right? We weren't done. And so we started thinking about what are the things that we liked about our jobs before, and how can we pull together something that takes away all of the negative or as much of the negative as possible and preserves everything that we wanted. There's a lot too now that we feel like the public is not getting out of the federal government, not getting out of federal law enforcement, not getting out of the intelligence community as far as reliable information on how Americans can protect themselves. And so the goal is to create something like that. So we were like, okay, let's do a co-op. That's sort of the idea, is to create this intelligence firm that is organized as a co-op, and to be able to provide some of those same types of services that the public needs from the government.
Public or companies? Both?
Yeah. So companies, individuals, it's still a very lofty goal. We've got a lot of directions that we want to be able to go, but we'll have to grow over time to be able to do all of it. The beauty of sort of the cooperative aspect of it is that the more of these intelligence professionals that we bring in to be able to provide these services in all of these different sort of industries and situations, you start to rebuild that corpus of knowledge that you need to be able to identify the growing threats and trends in the world.
It's rebuilding that community, that intelligence community, and really using those skills and that process that we are so well trained in to be able to apply it, but also to be able to work with that community. Yeah.
So one of the ways I like to start my interviews, I like to try to understand sort of how you got to where you are in this today in this world. And so I like to start by asking, where did you want to be when you grew up? You were a little girl, Jill. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I didn't want to grow up, so I will start with that. And my mother will agree. I did not want to grow up, but I had to. So my parents had always kind of pushed law school a little bit with me. I guess because I argued a lot. But I had a very strong sense of justice, a very strong sense of right and wrong. The rules make the world go round. I am very rules and process driven. And so I did that. I went to law school. It was also like I did want to help people. I didn't like that some people were pushed to the side. I went to a small women's university for undergrad. And so like that was another thing of we fight for, women to have a seat at the table still, even in the late 90s, early 2000s, that still was a thing. We're still fighting today
Right, for sure.
to make sure that we're not marginalized and a voice is heard. So that was always a very big thing for me. I don't think that I really maybe wanted to be a lawyer, but I sure as heck wanted to fight for people's rights. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
What about you, Phil? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a Chicago Bear. I mean, I was very small, but yeah, the first thing that I ever wanted to be when I grew up was a football player for the Chicago Bears. But obviously,
coming out of Oklahoma, you wanted to play for the Chicago Bears?
Oklahoma didn't have professional sports
Right.
at the time, and so you would find a wide range of preferences for teams. You'd find people who like the Cowboys or the Broncos or the Chiefs, but my dad was a Bears fan and my mom was a Redskins fan.
A mixed marriage.
They're something else now.
A mixed marriage.
Yeah. But no, I mean, as I got older, I also was very interested in the law. When I was in high school, I did mock trial and I thought about those kinds of things, but I didn't grow up in like a kind of place where, a lot of people were encouraged to have big dreams. And that did seem a little bit out of reach for me. And so at the time, I remember when I was a junior in high school, I had started going to Votech for auto body and, learning how to paint cars and fix up cars. And I loved that kind of stuff. I love working with my hands. And so I thought I'd probably work in a body shop or something like that. And then 9/11 happened. I was still 17, I wasn't old enough to go and sign up or anything, but I realized like, I need to be helping people. It was the same time that in my neighborhood, or not neighborhood, but I lived out in the country and my area had started a volunteer fire department and you could join when you were 17. And so I joined up the fire department. There were a whole 6 of us, I think, at the time who were doing this thing, and we'd go and put out wildfires and respond to car crashes or whatever out in the countryside. But it sort of got me to thinking more about public service. I decided I wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to maybe work for the highway patrol, right? These were big dreams in rural Oklahoma. And you needed a college degree to work for highway patrol at the time. And so I went to the local community college. I majored in criminal justice. And I remember I got admitted to the University of Oklahoma out of high school, but we didn't make a lot of money. And, after all of the grants and scholarships and everything, it was going to cost me $300 a semester to go to the University of Oklahoma. And to me, I was like, where am I going to come up with $300? So I was like, I can go to the community college here for free. Yeah, so I ended up doing that, majored in criminal justice. About a year and a half in, I needed out of there. I went to the recruiting office, joined the Marine Corps. So that's sort of how I ended up going the direction that I went.
So how has it been with your families back in the middle part of America? A lot of people I spoke to, what happened to them combined with their families' votes for Trump and support of Trump created some real tensions and real frictions, real issues for them. You guys came from middle America, so red parts of the country, as it were.
I've sort of reached a point in my life where I view where I live now as home, and I don't go back to Oklahoma a lot, so I can't speak too authoritatively on what it's like there. I went back a couple of times last year. You can definitely see a lot more conservative politics in general, but my family, we weren't political people. I never registered with a political party growing up. I knew that one of my parents was a Republican and one of them was a Democrat. I didn't know which one. That was just never something that we really talked about. And so it's not a big deal in our family. Like,
yeah, but they were very supportive of leaving. Philip's parents were very encouraging with, you're smart. You know when you need to leave somewhere.
They trusted me to make the right decision. Right. And I think that's what was important. Yeah, like I said, like where I grew up, politics was the government shouldn't be telling us what to do. That was the only thing that mattered.
So I'm from Mississippi. I'll tell you, I was a registered Republican until 2016, when Trump got the nomination. And this was right after the video of him talking and saying, grab him. Anyway, I grew up in a very conservative Christian household. It was very much do unto others and the golden rule, and we do right by people, and we help people, and we love people, and we love people no matter what, and we do all of this. So I still slightly conservative, but I'm not, like, I can't with that. But when I left my job, my mom knew it was bad because it had been spiraling for so long. She was supportive of it. My dad, he worries so much. When I told them I was considering taking the deferred resignation, he called the next day and he was like, I just don't think you should take it. I mean, this is a job and you've got a job, and what are you going to do with insurance and stuff? And I was just like, I don't know. I'll figure it out, but I can't do this. I mean, he fell through, but it was very much a, what are you doing? Like, why are you leaving? I think in their minds, it was more blaming the office here, the field office, and not so much the administration. But my parents and I do not talk about politics usually. And in fact, my parents did not know we were doing a podcast until we went to visit for my nephew's wedding in November. And my brother-in-law asked at the breakfast table, like, oh, so your sister says you're doing a podcast. What are you doing? And my dad's like, you're doing what? And then talking to my mom actually yesterday was the first time that I actually said, you realize it's because of this administration that I don't have a job right now. And that I blame this administration for this fact that I don't have a job right now. And just telling them I'm doing this podcast. I was interviewed for the New York Times. I've said things that I don't think that you would like. And so I haven't told you until now. But like, I mean, I would not talk to them about politics or anything like that. But after that conversation, because I was so upset, and my mom, I need you to know that I side with you every time, no matter what, no matter who the other person is. Never be afraid to tell me anything. We stick together like glue. I love you so much. And we do not agree with everything this administration does. And that was the first time in 8-9 years that they've ever said anything slightly negative about the administration. And so they're very supportive of us, but until recently, I would not have thought that. So, yeah.
What do you miss most about the job? Other than the people. Everybody misses the people.
I know, I was going to say the people.
But other than the people, what do you miss most?
The mission that we had, the mission that was, not the mission that is.
Right.
Let me clarify that. Doing the things that we did, doing the work that we did. So being an intelligence analyst, we're looking strategically at this very big picture of different threats, being able to look at the trends that are happening, to be able to say, hey, this may be something that's coming down the line, or we're seeing this pattern happen and we've seen this before, or to be a part of stopping a terrorist attack. But the mission was always protect the American people. It was always uphold the Constitution. And that's a hard thing, just to not have that there every day. It's hard. I mean, it was such a big part of everything that we did. And you knew you were doing something that was good and that was helpful, and that you were helping people stay safe, whether it be from new forms of fentanyl coming into the country and putting out alerts to different law enforcement about things to be on the lookout for, or for terrorism, and here are the indicators, and here's something that we're seeing. It's just, you don't have the impact that we did have.
What about you, Phil?
I mean, all of that, but I won't say it again. I think also I had the privilege of being a part of some really unique teams and programs throughout my time in the FBI, both when I was working in the field and when I was working at FBI headquarters. I worked on developing a lot of really unique capabilities and programs that were instrumental in detecting threats to the United States, and the sort of challenge there, right, of keeping up with the ever-evolving world of terrorist threats. It's almost like a drug, right? Like after a time, you get into this habit of, okay, I start my day this way, looking for whatever's new. Never heard of that before. Let me spend a couple of hours figuring out what it is, how it works. Now, what can I do about it? Now, how do I take that and communicate it across my organization and 17 other intelligence agencies? And it's this really rewarding feeling of knowing that what you're doing is having a global impact and making the whole world safer. You know, there are plenty of challenges that we face now, but like these aren't necessarily hard things, right? There's a set process of steps that you go through to start a business. There's a pretty good understanding of, you know, how do you do professional outreach to somebody to pitch a product or a service or an idea. But I think finding that same sort of need in the world that I can step in and fill in my own way, that's a big loss for me that I had developed over a long period of time. Yeah, so I think it's we'll get there, but that is for me the biggest sort of loss, I think, is that challenge and that knowledge that I'm living up to it.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Allan. We really appreciate it. So thank you for forking off with us.
And thank you for letting me do that, and thanks for sharing your stories with me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Forking Off. To our listeners still in government, remember, your integrity is worth more than your TSP. Leaving doesn't mean giving up on public service. It just means finding new ways to serve.
Until next time,
keep your ethics,
keep your dignity,
and we'll keep telling these stories.
If you're a former Fed with a story to tell, or you're wrestling with your own ethical crossroads, reach out to us at info@forkingoff.com.
Today's episode was created, produced, and edited by Jill and Philip Fields. You can find more information about this episode at forkingoff.com. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, or wherever you get your podcasts.